And we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Jessper Maquindang. And if you're here to build a stronger team and a more effective company culture, you're in the right place. In each episode, we have guests that share tips, strategies, and insight to help you and your people thrive. And today, I am very honored to introduce today's guest. From problem to profit through people, Irma Parone is a consultant, speaker, and multiple award winning international best-selling author, founder of Parone Group and president of the Florida Speakers Association. She equips organizations with a practical problem solving model that aligns customers, employees, and your organization. Since every person at every level makes daily decisions that drive results, Irma helps teams choose with clarity and confidence, earning loyalty, elevating accountability, and achieving exponential success. Let's welcome Irma Parone. Irma, great to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so honored. Happy to be
Absolutely.
here.
And I'm very excited for today's topic, which is this idea of building online culture and using a framework to drive exponential results. Let's start with the research. Could you share some data or statistics related to the field you're in?
Yeah, so problem solving, when I first started researching my first book, I have two books on problem solving. One for the decision makers, business owners, decision makers, and one for the employees. When I first started, and it's based on a system that I've used and then refined. And when I first started researching it, I read a lot of neuroscientist Paul MacLean, and he convinced me that emotions drive decisions. And you don't think about that, right? But they really do. I mean, and if you don't know that, you can really impact your outcomes. And many, we're afraid to make a decision, so we don't, so we get stuck. So a lot of that, and even in a 2025 review in Progress in Brain Research, found that emotions, even the insignificant gut decisions, are made through emotions. So it's pretty interesting. And then as far as statistics, I thought there was an interesting one that just came out. Let me pull this up. So it was problem solving directly correlates with leadership and business success. And this is from the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report. And the statistic is, what they said is that companies led by managers with strong problem capacity outperform peers up to 25% in productivity and innovation metrics, while employees identify as high-level problem solvers are actually 60% more likely to be promoted within 2 years. And my second book for employees is really about helping you win in the workplace. So that was a pretty cool statistic that I pulled up there.
Irma, thank you for sharing. I wanted to talk about these pieces of research. The first one, emotions. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that and how it affects decision making.
Well, it's huge. So if you think about it, what does fear do? It makes you stop and not make a decision. Well, the problem is you've made a decision not to make a decision, which is a decision, right? There's so many it's so impactful when people really sit down and I say, tell me why you made that decision. And we go through how it personally affects them. And it's amazing. Hurt people, right? If somebody's hurt by a decision. So how you're dealing with your employees, you want to be very careful, or your customers. So it makes total sense.
Irma, thank you for showing. Those are great points. And the other piece of research that you shared with managers 60% more likely to outperform, and employees are actually, let me take that back. That was managers 25% more likely to outperform, and employees 60% more likely to be promoted. Wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I want you to think about something. So if you're working for a company or you're leading a company, if everything's going smoothly, right? You have your processes, you have your customers, you have your employees, and everything's just going along smoothly. That's easy. Businesses can be easy. What becomes complicated, the true indispensable managers and employees are how they handle problems. So again, I think it makes total sense.
Irma, those are great points. And I was looking into the research as well, and just want to get your perspectives and your thoughts on them. So the first one came from consulting company LSA Global, and they've discovered that when it comes to alignment and when everything is flowing smoothly, highly aligned companies grow 58% faster in revenue and are 72% more profitable than unaligned organizations. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the way it has to be, right? So if I work for you and you're looking at things in one way and I'm looking at things in another way, we can't be aligned. One team on the same train moving in the same direction is a powerful force. If you're butting each other, if you're going in different directions, it just is not going to work. You need to figure that out.
Those are excellent points. And I saw another one from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they discovered that 85% of CEOs said employees were often or usually aligned with their company's values and directions. However, only half of them believe that alignment to actually be strong. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that number is way off. Personally, I think a lot of times employers, they hear things, and again, it's emotion. It's how you talk to your employees to make them feel very safe in responding to you. I think the alignment is a lot lower than, they did the research, so I'll probably go with what they said, but I'd want to dig into that a little deeper.
Yeah, those are good points. And there's one more piece of research that I wanted to share with you, and it comes from Forbes, and they discovered that teams with a strong sense of shared purpose and values have a 17% increase in performance compared to teams without that sense. Wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Again, it makes sense, right? If they're aligned, if they're all on the same train, moving in the same direction, and they have a shared focus and vision that is helpful for their customers, for their employees, and for their bottom line. It depends on what their vision is. But those are the ones that are more highly successful.
Excellent perspective. And Irma, let's take a deeper dive into the topic. So this idea of the framework to drive exponential results, I'd like to know your journey, your story. What brings you from where you were to where you are today?
Well, I was in the security industry, the security guard industry for many years. My last 15 years, I was a senior vice president. I ran the state of Florida for the company. And the last year I was there, my mother got dementia. And I moved her down here, and I moved her 3 miles from me. The problem was I traveled a lot, and she was very confused. So I called my boss one day and said, I got to go. I'll give you whatever notice you need, but I got to go. So 2 months later, I was unemployed and thought I have to do something. I spent every day with my mother, and in between those times, I had to do something. And I just thought I'm going to get into the side of the business that I love, which is providing a high value service, getting employees and companies to really gel together and win exponentially, right? Help every person at every level of the company thrive. So that's when I started my business. And a couple of years later, I started writing my book.
Excellent. Could you tell us about the framework that you'd like to expand upon?
Yes. So it's an 8-step framework, and the company, the business, and the employees, all the first few steps all start out the same. And then the last steps kind of go into different directions based on where they are. But like do you want to hear about the steps in the framework?
I'd be happy to learn more if you can share more.
Sure. So the first step is determine the problem. And it's so funny because most people think they know what problem they're solving. And I'll give you one example that happens all the time. I get employers, because I usually work with employer organizations, who will call me and say, help me find great employees. And I say, tell me more. Well, we hire these people. They look like they have steady employment. And then before the ink dries on the application, they vanished. So I looked into these, and in some cases, they hired poorly. So, we would talk about that. In most cases, it had nothing to do with how they hired. They just didn't grab them when they brought them in. right? So what I mean is that if you hire me and my resume is still out there and I don't have a compelling reason to stay, I might be tempted to hear that question. So, or that other person. So really determine this. One of the companies I called recently, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I spent 2 years firing recruiters, right? Increasing pay when I was already competitive. Once we narrowed it down and they went from how do I hire better employees to how do I reduce turnover to very specifically, how do I create a culture so strong that if another company calls my employees, they say, I love my company." So first step is determine the problem and make sure, right? The second step is determine the root cause. Because again, you want to make sure that you are focused on what's really causing that problem. And then we want to look at the third step is to figure out what's the impact of that problem. Because as I said, a lot of people really want to maybe put that problem on a shelf because they're afraid to work on it. But if they don't understand what's the impact to the customer, what's the impact to the employee, and what's the impact to the bottom line? Because if any one of those lose, what happens? You lose as well, right? And then we get into the problem solving steps. So there's a whole chapter on a lot of different problem solving methods, from brainstorming to brainwriting to the danger of the single story, and a lot of different things there. And then again, we're going to find maybe the top 3 that we've come up with from our problem solving model. And then we're going to evaluate the alternatives. So which one has a positive impact on the most? You can't make everything perfect. But again, looking at the solutions against the customers, the employees, and the bottom line is the real beauty in this model. It helps you. Once I have a downloadable form, once you put it all in there, it's like the right problem just pops out, right? And then the decision step. So decisions aren't just made, right? You want to evaluate them, check them. There's a lot of pieces in actually making the decision. The next step is prepare for impact. So no matter what decision, there's positive and there's negative, right? There's the good side and the bad side. You want to be prepared for that so that you can approach it properly. And then implement the decision. Who's going to do what? What are the time labels? When are you going to check back? You know, shake it out, make sure that it's working, and make sure that, you know, everything's in line. And a lot of people don't realize that if they made the wrong decision, then go back. It's okay. You know how many decisions we make in a day?
How many do we make?
35,000.
Wow.
We make 35,000. Now, some of that's, you know, what route to take to work, what to eat in the morning, but we make so many decisions. It's okay to make a mistake, but if you go through a framework, you're pretty much not guaranteed, but you're probably going to make a lot better decision because you're looking at all the pieces. This even works at home, right? So if 2 parents and a child are having this problem and you look, how does it impact my child? How does it impact my spouse? How does it impact me? So the same type of framework, looking at the stakeholders, really helps you focus in, not get emotional, and make the best decision.
Irma, that's very unique. And as we take a deeper dive, especially with the framework, could you tell us more about the benefits and outcomes of following the process?
Well, I will tell you that it's so funny. I got a call from somebody that I can't name, of course, but he said, and his boss is very challenging. He doesn't like anything that anybody puts out there except him, right? So he went through my framework on a really challenging change they needed to put into the organization. And he called me and he said, it worked. It just works. I mean, because, well, another piece in this puzzle, another piece in the book, in one of the steps, is how to present problems to the decision maker if you're not the decision maker, right? So it has you lay it out based on all of the important things to the business owner. And it really lays everything out so that you can then say, this is where we are. Here's the impact. Here's the impact to your customers. Here's the impact to your employees. And this is what it's doing to our company. Now, these are the three different ideas I came up with. And each one of them had positives and negatives, right? This one, the one that I chose, I believe is the strongest, and it's because. So it goes through everything so that your boss, the decision maker, can see the thoughtfulness that you put into it, that you have to look at the company's best interest if you're proposing something to a company. And I talk to this to employees the same way. If you go in there saying, I want a promotion, why do you want a promotion? Well, because I want to make more money. You're not going to get that promotion, right? If you say, I want that promotion because I am driven to help other people succeed, you might want the money and want the other people to succeed, right? But it's the way you approach it. And if you really are going in just for the money, don't do it. Bad idea. So did I answer your question?
You did. That was an excellent way to put it.
Thanks.
And Irma, let's take a deeper dive. And I did have questions around the framework, and especially when it comes to the sense of alignment. And I was curious to know, in your experience, where does misalignment usually begin? Is it at the top? Is it the middle? Is it the front line? Curious to know.
I will say yes to all of. I will say yes, yes, and yes. And here's what happens. So when we were born, we were totally dependent, right, on other people. And then as we learned, as we grew, our caregivers taught us to be independent. So it's, how do I solve problems for myself? And that's great because we need to. The misalignment is the interdependency, learning how to work with other people, learning how to see, regardless of what level you are in, from a new employee to the CEO, how does what I need help the rest of my team? How does it help my customers? And if you look at it, when you're, if a CEO comes out and says, we're going to do this because we need to drive more growth and great. People understand that companies need to make money. But it's just like the employee who says, I want a promotion just because I want more money. You have to look at, well, you don't have to do anything. My recommendation, and the big piece of this whole puzzle, is understand what the impact is for your customers, for your employees, for your bottom line. And for employees, it's absolutely no different. If I want to win, if I want to take home a good paycheck for my family, then I want to be indispensable. I want to be that employee that I always say, you don't want to, what you want is for your boss to use the pathetic Irma method to keep you, the suck up method. And here's what that is. So if you give me your resignation and you're my indispensable employee, imagine this. I drop on the floor. I grab your ankle. I say, please don't leave. It's pathetic. It's very sad. But that gets people to see, wouldn't you love your boss to drop on the floor and grab your ankle and say, please don't leave me? So that's what you're going for. You want to be that indispensable person. If you're talking with a client, what do you need? What do you want for an outcome? And then you work together to look at that big picture to move forward.
Irma, that's a great way to put it. And I was curious, as we look further into this, what are some warning signs that we should look for when organizations are not aligned or things aren't flowing smoothly?
People that don't care.
Oh.
If you have people that don't care, my son used to say, well, they just have to give a shit, and it's so true. People who have a culture of negativity, who don't care about anybody but themselves. I don't care if they're your best employee. If they're pulling your team down, get them out. And believe me, you'll find somebody else. I know, we look at these employees and say, wow, he's really nasty to everybody, but he's so good at sales, or he's so good, with the technology. Get him out. Get him out the door.
Wow, excellent perspective, Irma. And I was curious to learn more about the framework itself and the inspiration behind it. Well, I was curious to know the story of what inspired you to develop that framework.
Well, that's a good question. So when I was in the nuclear security industry, and my boss wanted me to be the labor relations manager for his region. And I said, I'd love to, but I don't know anything about labor relations. And he said, here's what you're very good at. You're very good at solving problems, looking at the customer and the employee, making sure that you see both sides. So many years later, I'm a vice president. I leave my company when I put my notice in. And one of my peers, another vice president, said, we're really going to miss you. And I thought, yeah, everybody says that. He said, no, he said, you really had a good way of looking at all sides of the issue. So when I started writing my book, you forget about those things, right? And I was writing a leadership book. And people kept saying, authors that knew how to write books kept saying, narrow it down, narrow it down. I thought, what do I take out? Everything's so important. And then somebody said to me, what do people call you for the most? And it was problem solving. And then I thought, okay, so a problem solving model. So how do I do it? And that's when I started putting it into steps. So that's really how that came alive.
Irma, thank you for sharing your story. And when it comes to this framework, what is the first step that organizations need to take to really implement this effectively?
Well, the first step they should take is to read the books, right? Make sure they understand the framework or call me and work with me on the framework. And some companies will use both books and they do a little book club, right? So the managers and the business owner, they'll read the problem solving model for the company, and then they'll have their employees, the ones that want to get in on this club, right? You don't force people to read the problem solving model to win in the workplace. And actually, I suggested the managers read both so they know what they're suggesting to their employees, and then just start having conversations. I love doing little not workshops, just roundtables, and saying, what did you get out of this? What has changed since you read this? How can you better work with your employees? Or how can you better work with your boss? How can you make the environment so strong that your customers never want to leave? And that's where I would start.
Great way to put it, Irma. And speaking of change, what are common mistakes leaders make when they're trying to create change or alignment within their organization?
Well, I think the biggest problem is not respecting the fact that people hate change, right? Everybody hates change because there's work to be done, right? And so I think, again, it comes back to making sure that you're looking at things from the other people's viewpoint, that you're really seeing why are we implementing this change? You don't want to change things just for the sake of change, but what is the problem? What was the actual problem? Or what is the desire that makes us want this change? And then from that, it's looking at each group, whether it's the employees or the leadership team or even the customers, because again, there's positive and negative, right? When you make changes. And it's making sure that they see the big picture, the big outcome, and how it benefits them and the whole to win exponentially.
Irma, actually, on that note, how do we handle resistance from senior leaders who think things are already going well? In reality, it's not, but how do you handle their resistance?
Well, it depends on their level. If they're the owner, I'd probably leave the company. But, again, I shouldn't say that, because there's a lot of people, again, just because somebody's an owner doesn't mean they're perfect, right? People have this imaginary halo around people's heads and think just because they're the boss that they know everything. Well, they don't. And without insulting them, again, in the problem solving model, it teaches you how to propose change, how to make sure they see that it's the best thing for the company, which will be the best thing for that business owner. Because if you don't lay it out in those terms, if it's just what about me, then they won't go for it. and especially the really, really strongly negative people. As I said, this one person who proposed a change with his boss, with the CEO of the company, said he couldn't believe it, that he actually approved the change. But it's the way you approach it. It's always in the how, and making sure you do your homework. You also want to say, now look, here's the negative part. If we do this, you don't want to hold things back. Here's the positive, but here's the hiccup. But the hiccup here is a lot lower than what we're dealing with.
Irma, excellent perspective. And I do see a comment in the chat, and I'll bring that up. And this comes from Natalie Runoff. Something you mentioned earlier, and I completely agree with the concept of a wholesome contribution, soft and hard capabilities from the employees.
Awesome. Hi, Natalie.
And adding to that, speaking of which, curious to know, since we're on the concept of resistance and buy-in and change, how do we get buy-in from frontline employees when we introduce change in the organization?
Again, it's really looking at it from what they need. When I was in labor relations in the nuclear security industry, we took over an account, and they hated, the supervisors hated the employees, and the employees hated the supervisors. And they went on strike. I mean, which everybody lost on that. But when we really dug into it, it was just that they had a mindset. The supervisors thought just because the employees were in a union, they were bad. And the supervisors thought the employees thought all managers are out to hurt the employees. And it's really getting them together first, each one, and sitting with them and saying, tell me what you want. And tell me why you think that this other group is the problem. And getting each person to see their own piece of it. And it, takes a little time, but it's certainly workable. You're going to have those outstanders who you probably just need to get rid of. Again, when you have that kind of poison, you don't need that on your team.
It's very valuable to consider. And Irma, speaking of driving exponential results for organizations, if there's one thing leaders could do today to start aligning decisions across their team, what would that one action be?
That one action would be to really sit back and say, what do I want and what am I missing? Why don't I have what I want? And then put it into your problem-solving model. What's the biggest thing that will make the biggest change for your company? And focus on that, and make sure every day you're doing something, even if it's little, because we know you're busy, right? Even if it's one little step toward getting what you need.
Irma, that has a lot of impact. And I actually wanted to take another dive into your journey as well. You're a multiple award-winning author. Could you tell us more about your books and your journey into becoming an award-winning author?
Well, I wanted to write a book. I mean, I'll tell you the first piece of it. The journey started with Voices. So Voices of the 21st Century. This is a book, and it was 50 women who came together throughout the world. 50 women, and I was honored to be selected by this. And it's Gail Watson. And so I wrote one piece of this book, one piece of it, and it ended up being an international best-selling book. International best-selling. It's Voices of the 21st Century, bold, brave, and brilliant women who make a difference. And so then a couple years later, I decided I wanted to write my own book. And I just, I went to people that I knew that were great authors. They were award-winning authors. I got help from people who knew, always go to people who know more than you do. That's a big key to this. What do they say? If you're the smartest one in the room, get another room, right? So Melissa G. Wilson is somebody who helped me really outline my book. And you could do a lot of research and throw words in a book, but it really has to outline. It really has to lay out so that people are interested and want to get to the next chapter and the next chapter. So, I wrote my second book in 22 and just started applying for awards. And that has 4 awards. And then my book that I just put out last year already has 5 awards. So it's just finding credible sources for awards, putting them out there, and hoping that they come up for air. And they did. I've been very fortunate. I've had so much great support. Akash Korea was another person who helped me a lot in my journey in book writing. So finding the people that know what they're doing and asking them for help.
Irma, congratulations on your writing journey. That's very exciting to hear.
Thank you.
And as we wrap up, what are the best ways to reach you should people want to learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's the biggest social media piece that I use. And then my website is paronegroup.com. If you're a golfer, that's spelled Parone, par1, paronegroup.com. And there's a contact me piece in there. And those are the 2 best ways to reach me.
Excellent. And Irma, there was another comment that popped in, and I wanted to get your thoughts. And this comes from Natalie Renoff. I'm focusing on the strategy execution gap. And in my opinion, middle managers are overworked, underutilized, and undervalued, which is one of the major reasons for the increased gap. What is your opinion about this?
Well, I thank you, Natalie, for the question and the comment. But here's the thing. I think that a lot of it, too, is developing your middle managers. Well, even your senior managers, right, who are dumping on the middle managers. So I do a lot of work on time management as well, making sure that people are focused on what matters most. And so once you do some training with these people, which I'm sure you've already done, but really revisiting time management and making sure that people understand how do they delegate? How do they stay focused on the big picture? How do they put out fires so they have less work to do on firefighting and more on problem solving? But without getting more information, Natalie, feel free to call me. I'd be glad to have a conversation with you. Hope that helped a little bit.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Irma. And before we go, what is your final piece of wisdom for our audience?
Make sure that you really care about your people. I mean, really, I can't say that enough. If you don't care about their success, if you don't care about their families, and that doesn't mean that you give them the right to do whatever they want to do. There's a difference between a happy employee and an engaged employee. A happy employee means it's an employee who maybe sleeps during their shift and still gets paid. That's not what we're looking for. We want engaged employees, employees who are engaged in doing a great job and engaged in supporting their boss and their company, and really staying, really caring about our customers and our employees and our bottom line and looking at the big picture. So if you don't care, you're really not going to see your big vision. And without seeing your big vision and helping and getting the help of other people, that interdependent help, you're going to have a bigger struggle.
Irma, that is an excellent piece of wisdom. And thank you again for today's session. I found it very valuable. I had a lot of key takeaways, highlights, and insights, and want to thank you for sharing your perspective today. And for everyone out there, please feel free to share this conversation with other leaders for any valuable insights that you'd like to take to them. And Irma, thank you again for today's session. Really appreciated your time and the insights that you've shared with everyone.
Thank
and
you.
Everyone out there,
it was an honor. It was an honor.
Thank you, Irma. And for everyone out there, thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.